Hey guys, it's Dean. Welcome to the Better Man podcast. Today's episode, I have on Jayson Gaddis, who is a world-class relationship coach and expert. Really fortunate to have him on. He is the author of the book called Getting to Zero, which I have right here and have been reading for the last few days. He is also the founder of the Relationship School, which is a incredibly comprehensive program, 9-month program, from what I understand, to teach people how to show up better in their relationships. So, Jayson, thanks for being here. This is really cool.
Yeah, Dean, I'm psyched to be here and get into it with you for sure.
Yeah. So I used to be of the thought that when it came to physical health and well-being, that if you ate well, if you did your exercise, and if you slept well, that you would be super healthy and live forever. And then I started learning more and realized that that's not the case, and that the number one factor in your overall health is the quality of your relationships. So, hopefully that gives you enough reason to want to pay attention to this podcast if you're listening, and to really start putting some more effort into your relationships. So this conversation, a lot of the Better Man podcast I do in a way that um, I'm trying to develop myself. I'm asking questions. I'm having conversations that about things that I'm struggling with. And if you're listening, I know that these are things that you guys struggle with as well. So a lot of these questions are going to be focused on things that I would ask. I'm also going to be asking questions about men in relationships in general. This applies to all types of relationships, heteronormative as well as homosexual. So this is going to be something that will apply to hopefully a lot of you guys. And I'm really excited to do this. Jayson, do you want to just maybe introduce yourself and go into what you do and what makes you really cool?
Sure. First of all, I just want to acknowledge you for caring that or seeing and getting that health is more than just physical stuff and eating well, and that that our relationships do impact that. And if guys don't believe that, you can just Google the Harvard study on relational health, really, longevity. So thanks for being, open-minded person like that.
Mm-hmm.
Because I think a lot of guys do think me being quote healthy means I just need to lift weights and run and do yoga and stuff.
Mm-hmm.
And yeah, that's part of it. But I think every guy knows if their marriage is in the shitter, they're not probably feeling that good. So anyway, yeah, let's see, what would I say about myself? I founded the Relationship School because I got tired of complaining that there is no class in high school or college on this really vital life skill.
Yeah.
And prior to that, I was a coach and a psychotherapist. I got a master's degree in psychology back in the early 2000s. And I'm a psychology nerd. I'm a personal growth geek. I want to optimize every area of my life. But the biggest pain point in my life prior to graduate school was partnership and relationship and intimacy. I just had a lot of blocks and I didn't know what the hell I was doing. And I blamed all the women I dated. So, prior to being into personal growth, I was kind of a classic shut down dude that drank a lot and smoked a lot of weed and did a lot of drugs and blamed other people and would try to kind of, compete with other guys in this sort of way of sports or, whatever, trying to look cool.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, so that's a little bit of history about me. And I'm currently a dad and a husband, and I love being married and love my kids a ton.
Yeah. So it
My
sounds
wife.
like you had a pretty typical experience for the American male growing up, and
Yeah.
your the lack of exposure to knowledge on how to have healthy relationships, and maybe chasing some of the wrong things or some of the things that didn't matter as much as you thought they did. So
Yeah.
and now I just want to know, like, what are two of your favorite books right now in the self
Mm.
category?
Gabor Mate's Myth of Normal,
Okay.
which is a really good book on health and wellness. And it's incredible. He's definitely one of my mentors. And he's been on my podcast a few times. the core message there is that when you want to belong, you'll trade your true authentic expression to belong, and that will actually create health problems for you.
Mm,
So a lot of people think the Myth of Normal is a health book. I think it's a relationship book.
mm.
Anyway, that's one of my top ones. I'm currently reading a book called Quit,
Okay.
which is the power of quitting things, which is so antithetical
Oh my
to
gosh.
so
Yes.
many guys who are like, no, never quit, always persevere and push through.
Right.
And of course, it's written by a woman who has the wisdom to quit,
Yes.
and the willingness to quit. Anyway, I'm getting a lot out of that book right now. I'm not done, so I can't say it's like my favorite or anything, but it's definitely serving me.
Yeah. Insert joke here about not finishing the book on quitting. um, so, sorry. Um, so, like, for me, I think a really great question to start with is, where do men tend to mess up in their relationships? What are the patterns that they routinely engage in that are detrimental to their relationships?
Dude, the biggest one, the single biggest, I think, fuck up that guys do over and over again is they um, think they know what they're doing.
Okay.
And that means if I think I know what I'm doing in yoga or, relationships or money or whatever, I won't read anything and I won't learn anything.
Hmm.
Because why would I learn or need to learn anything? Because I already know what I'm doing. Right. And that's the biggest mistake guys make right out of the gate. And those guys typically have really short-term relationships. They have relationships that aren't very fulfilling. They have relationships that are win-lose. I win, but you lose. They compete. They try to find the hot girl and have good sex, thinking that that's somehow, and then they perform. They get stuck in performance, thinking that's somehow going to get them what they want. But the wise man, the guys who are really humble enough to learn that they have something to learn, I guess, humble enough to know that they have something to learn, will just read a book or listen to your podcast or be like, shit, I don't know what I'm doing. I should ask for help. I should go to therapy or get some coaching because I'm kind of stuck here.
Yeah. Yeah. That makes total sense. I think yeah. So in your book, you talk about 4 stages. So it sounds like first stage is recognizing, hey, you don't know everything when it comes to relationships. And then I'm in the phase right now where I'm learning, but I also don't know which lesson applies to which situation.
Mm-hmm.
So like it's almost very hard for me to naturally have a conversation because in my mind I'm like I feel like I'm going through it's like a test in a way. I'm like, which lesson applies here? What do I say here? What am I supposed to? So
Right.
like
Yeah.
I'm trying to like implement
Uh-huh.
what I'm learning as I go, which sometimes frustrates my wife because she's like, just be emotional,
Just be
just like
present and be here. Yeah.
yeah. And I'm like, I don't. If I do that, I think I'll yell. I don't want to yell. So
Yeah.
yeah, I think it's so interesting that you guys just straight up don't know how to feel like unless you've actually taken the time to practice that or I think a lot of people just have it and they grew up in environments where it was encouraged to express what you're feeling and to be able to to safely have a range of emotions instead of just happiness. But for a lot of guys, whether by societal norms of male behavior or because of the environment that they grew up in, they don't know what they're feeling. So like if
Yeah.
you ask a guy just like, how are you feeling? He's like, let me think about it. Let me think
Yeah.
about how I'm feeling.
Or he says that stock answer. I'm fine. I'm
Yeah,
good.
I'm good. Yeah. So yeah, for me, like realizing that you don't think about what you feel, you feel what you feel.
Uh-huh.
Right? You can't like think about what you're feeling. You just have to be able to intuit what you're feeling. That was
It's
yeah, but difficult to do.
Oh yeah. Yeah, especially if you grew up with a dad like me or in a family like mine and so many men where we're, as boys, trained to not feel, because feeling on the playground and being the kid that's crying is weak, and you're going to
Mhm.
get made fun of or bullied. And I didn't want to get made fun of or bullied, even though I was made fun of and bullied, um, for being sensitive and etc. There's a big cost for feeling for boys, depending on the environment, whether it's a sports culture, or a church, or just school. It's too bad, because there's still so many boys um, being taught to be tough and not look gay or not look feminine or whatever. And it's like, no. Like, okay, well, if you want to shut down your emotions, your boy's emotions, no problem. Just understand the downstream consequences, that as an adult, he's going to be completely in the weeds in an intimate relationship. He's going to be fucked. You're
Mhm.
just handcuffing him so that by the time he's 25, 35, 45, and he gets married, his partner is going to be incredibly frustrated with him.
Yeah, and I think what's really interesting about the situation you're talking about right now is that most guys who grew up that way, they won't recognize that it was an issue,
Hmm.
right? They'll say that like, "Oh, I had like a really good I had a really good childhood. Like my my mom was there a lot, and my
Yeah.
dad was there when he wasn't working,
Hmm.
um, and they kind of justify it. They logically justify, and this is my experience too. They logically justify, no, I had a really good childhood, and my parents did the best that they could with the time that they had, um, and it's not that you're like you're saying that you missed something and then like going on a crusade after your parents and like you didn't give
Right.
me, you didn't help me with my emotional intelligence. But there has to be, and there's also, there are much worse things than just not having emotional security um, in your home environment. But
Yeah.
it is still something that you have to deal with, and it's still something that negatively impacted you. And so, yes, it might not be as bad as some other things, but it's still something that you have to point at and say, oh, okay, this did have a negative impact on me, and I do need to do something about it rather than just excusing it.
Yeah. Totally. I mean, for the guys listening that, like, I had a great childhood, or I don't remember, or whatever, I'm fine. It kind of doesn't matter. Your body remembers, and all you need to do is look at how your performance slash results are in your intimate relationships as an adult. That speaks volumes. And like attracts like, so you attracted usually the perfect person to trigger you into all of your unresolved stuff. So if you think you had a great childhood, it's like, well, think again. Your nervous system has a different memory, which is the true memory, and it'll get activated and awakened in a marriage or a long-term partnership, and that's great, so that you can grow and develop yourself. But if you want to be comfortable and you want to not have any pain, or you want to just sort of coast along, then yeah, I don't recommend intimate partnership.
Mm. Yeah, I can't remember what I was reading, but I read something recently that said that your marriage is a very good mirror into your overall
Yeah.
your overall health and and it might have even been your book, your overall health and well-being. So guys on the
Hmm.
outside, they can be, maybe they're professionally they're doing well, maybe they look a certain way and they look healthy. Um, Maybe they've got some kids, got some great photos. They have friends, but if they're struggling in their marriage, then in all likelihood, they're really not doing as well as
Right.
appearances say.
Yeah, and then they'll go into shame about that, and a lot of men don't want to feel shame or be with shame or even be seen in shame, so they'll posture over the shame, and that will look like defensiveness
Mm,
and guardedness and blame, self blame or other blame. It'll be someone else's fault, or it'll be, yeah, you're such a piece of shit, or whatever. But the wisdom of shame is to show us that we have more to learn, and that we're out of integrity with ourselves, and we are comparing ourselves to a fantasy or some ideal that's, we haven't earned yet, and we got to do the work and do the reps to get there.
Yeah. And to this point, I think we've talked a lot about information, and we've talked a lot about um, understanding why some of these problems exist. So, for men who deal with shame, and this is, I definitely do. And initially, I had a podcast guest on, Nate Checketts, founder of Roan, and I asked him what was like what was the number one thing threatening men in their health right now, and his answer was shame. And my initial response was, oh, that must suck if you have to deal with shame. And I was so dissociated from it that I was like, nah, that's not me. And in reality,
Yeah.
every time I think about, oh, what's wrong with my relationship? Oh, why am I not more successful with my business? Oh, I don't have more time why am I not doing these things to elevate my physical health? Like, that's all shame. And it's, how do people go about dealing with shame in a healthy way?
Yeah. It's a good question. I mean, I think shame we have to first reframe shame, define it, and reframe it. So I define shame from one of my mentors as it's the perception that you caused more harm than good to yourself.
Hmm.
You've done something that has more disadvantages than advantages, behavior and action. And so let's say a classic one is a guy surfing porn and hiding it. And of course, he's hiding it because he feels shame. He's not out about it. He's not posting on Facebook and Instagram, hey, I surfed porn today. And, for obvious reasons.
Mm-hmm.
And if he's married, he's definitely like keeping it under wraps because of the potential consequences that he doesn't want to deal with. Right. So again, very understandable. This one's why men hide here. But shame can be like, so if I'm surfing porn, I feel bad because why do I feel bad? Why can't I just surf porn and feel good? Well, I feel bad because there's so much stigma around it. And also I'm comparing myself to, I think I should be porn free. I think I should be some saint and never kind of have these little boundary violations. And when I compare myself to an ideal that I can't live up to, I'm going to feel shame. So it might be better to lower the bar for yourself and be like, okay, apparently I can't not use porn yet. I'm not there,
Mm-hmm.
but maybe I can start cutting back and reeling that behavior in and setting goals actually around this. And then I feel better about myself. I don't feel ashamed. I feel like, okay, I went from every day to 2 days a week. And that was my goal. And I am hitting my goal. How do I feel about myself? God, I feel actually good about myself. I don't feel shame. And then eventually maybe it's 0 times or 0 porn. That's just one example, but we have to do things to change our behavior to feel good about ourselves, usually.
So porn is one example. That's new. My dog's never jumped in the chair before. So porn's one good example. What are some other examples of, do we call these addictions? Do we call these coping habits? What's the term here?
Yeah, good question. So with porn, it might be an addiction. It might be just a compulsion.
Mm-hmm.
Frequent use, for example. I define addiction as anything that starts to disrupt my relationships. So another example, though, let's just say, just to try to keep it even more simple, let's say you want to be a better lover in the bedroom with your partner, and for whatever reason, you feel shame because you lose your erection. You can't please her in the way that she wants. You aren't having enough sex in your mind. You think you should be having more, and you're blaming yourself in some way. So you're going to feel shame. Like if you're, again, think you should be somewhere other than where you are, you're probably going to feel shame. Same with money, same with health. If I think I should do yoga just like you, Dean, I'm going to feel shame, right? I'm just going to feel, I'm just going to be like, geez, I'm never going to be like Dean. I feel so ashamed. My body's not like him. I'm not as flexible as him. Fuck, I can't hang in there for as long of a class. I'm not doing my exercises like Dean's telling me to. I feel bad about myself, which is shame, right?
Mm.
So I got to stop comparing myself to you, and I got to be like, okay, Dean's an ideal that one day, and because how long's Dean been doing yoga? A long time. Well, okay, cool. If I do it for 5 years, maybe I can be like Dean, but I'm going to have to commit, and I'm going to have to practice daily or 3 days a week or whatever it is. And as I get real with my goal, um, I might, again, I can reframe the shame, and it motivated me to set goals now and start changing my behavior so that I feel better about myself.
Mm. And so part of shame is to avoid comparing yourself, to avoid setting unrealistic expectations, and then instead coming up with more realistic goals based on where you are, and then and I'm just filling in the blanks here, but it may be some sort of self-love or gratitude practice that allows you to commend yourself for where you are rather than where you want to be.
Yeah, let me say it this way. So shame is like feedback, right? If I'm comparing myself to anyone, thinking I should be farther along, I'm probably going to feel shame, and that's just feedback. I'm like, the
Mm,
feedback is, yeah, you should feel bad as long as you're comparing yourself to a fantasy or an ideal.
mm,
So how do I accept myself right now? Well, I have to look around at my life and be like, well, do I accept myself right now? Do I like how I'm showing up? And I always ask two questions every day. Do I like who I am, and do I like how I am?
mm,
So do I like who I am in the morning? Like, I ask myself this every day. And do I like how I'm being, how I'm showing up for my life? If the answer is no, there's probably some shame, and I need to like reorient. Like, okay, well, apparently I need to set more realistic goals. I need to, maybe it's a gratitude practice. Maybe it's just, look, I'm going to practice accepting me right now, given my limitations. But every day, I'm going to take one step, and that one step helps me appreciate my effort. And so many of us got praise for the end result
mm-hmm,
as kids, and this is like really bad parenting: is praise your kid for the end result, don't praise them for the journey. That's bad parenting. Good parenting is praise them, acknowledge their effort
mm-hmm,
over and over, more than the outcome.
mm-hmm,
And then we train adults to feel the same way. We like ourselves because we're efforting, we're working towards something, versus I hate myself, and then when I reach the goal, I'm going to somehow like myself.
mm. Yeah, I mean that's the thesis of grit.
Mm.
Is it grit? No, it's a Carol Dweck mindset.
Oh
Uh,
yeah, yeah, growth mindset.
yeah,
Nice. Yeah, I love that book.
yeah. I read that book and I was like, "Will you read this, wifey?" Um,
Yeah,
I don't think I asked her hard enough. That's another question that I had. So, like, for someone who,
yeah,
and I think men, or whoever, I think people tend to attract opposites.
yeah.
And so it's very unlikely. I mean, I've seen some people who do have this dynamic where they're both like really into self development. Um, but usually it's one person is really into it and the other person is not. And
Hmm.
so and I'm assuming that the guys who are, involved in your, well, I guess I can't assume. So for the guys who are in relationship school, what how much of them are there because their partners reached a point where they're like, I'm out if you don't fix this,
Hmm.
versus guys who are there because they're like, I want to be better. Like I really don't like the
Yeah,
way things are going and I want to improve this.
yeah. Well, you're talking about the two things that I think motivate men. Is one is just the desire to be better, and then the other one is pain, right? Pain, shame, etc. Is like, fuck, I feel terrible about how I'm showing up, and I want to fix it. Um, which I think are great. Both are great motivators. I don't know if I don't know that I have the stats on that, but I would just say it's probably it's it's both. I'll just say that.
Hmm.
Have men come here because they're in pain, and other guys are just like, hey, I have a good marriage, and I want to be in a great marriage.
Hmm.
Yeah.
So my question from that then is, how do guys who are in the relationship school, who are really interested in the self development, even if they're not interested in the self development, but how do they bring their partners into it? Not bringing them into like the actual lessons, but how do they get them on board
Yeah. With the
with
work.
the work. Yeah,
Yeah.
because it'd be really difficult for you to just do that on your own and then not have the
Yeah.
conversations with your partner. So how do you yeah, how do you get your partner into that if they're not as interested?
Yeah. And by the way, I have a semi chapter in the toward the end of the book about this, which is how do you enroll your partner into relationship work or getting on board with repairing after
Mm,
conflict. So first of all, it actually, you can have a good relationship where one partner is going to therapy and reading books and doing all the work and coming here to the school or whatever, and the other partner isn't. You can do that, but the person that happens when the person who's not quote into personal development, they're a quick study and they take suggestions easily. They're receptive to feedback. They have their own ways of getting to the end result. For example, I was talking to someone yesterday who's been married a long time, and he said, my wife doesn't do, basically, she never apologizes. She never takes ownership for anything. But the very next day, she's applied what I was wanting her to do, and she's just doing it.
mm,
So that kind of thing can work. I don't think those relationships are as deep as relationships where both people are at least invested in a couple key areas of the growth stuff. Like, you don't have to be into personal growth like as a high value, but in a marriage or a long-term relationship or as a parent, if you want to be a good collaborating parent, you do need to be into just a couple fundamentals. Taking responsibility for your part in a fight, saying, yep, I did that thing that hurt you. Understanding impact on the other person, that my behavior sometimes impacts you, and that's a bummer for you. And I see that I do that sometimes. Um, and the willingness to like clean up the mess, which I call repairing, which is really what my book is about, is how do we get back to a good place as a team? And if I'm taking responsibility and you're not, we can't get back to a good place because you're saying it's all my fault all the time.
mm,
And I'm the only person that takes responsibility. That is just going to be a very resentful marriage, and it's going to eventually not work. Um, so as long as the other partner, they don't have to read books or be in a growth and development, but they do need to do a couple of these fundamentals so that the marriage or the partnership can thrive.
mm. And that brings up something that I remembered from reading in your book, which is this: a lot of men included, but everybody, they have the outside in approach
Yeah,
to fixing things, which is, instead of being the change, instead of now I'm like Michael Jackson, like be the change you want to be. I forgot what
yeah,
that song is. But instead of being the change, you're looking at the situation and thinking, okay, if you just changed, or if like this just changed, then everything would be fine. And instead, it's the inside out approach, and starting change
yeah.
with yourself. So it's recognizing. I don't know. Maybe you can talk more about that versus I think what most of us tend to do, which is the outside in.
Yeah, I think one of the biggest relationship killers is asking our partner to be different than who they are.
Mm,
You partnered with this person for a reason, and I would trust that reason, and it's usually to mirror back your own limitations, and so that you can work through them. Something to that effect. Uh, so outside in is, yeah, you need to change, and the other person usually feels judged and criticized on the receiving end of that.
mhm,
Inside out is what you're saying. It's, I'm going to be the change. I'm going to inspire you by being. I'm going to live an inspiring life, and I'm going to work on myself. And hopefully, you'll be like, "Damn, you are so fulfilled over there, and you're like on the move, and you're always developing and growing. There's always someone you're meeting, and some podcast you're listening to, and I'm inspired by that, and I want to be like you, and I don't want to be left behind. I want to hang with you on this journey that you're doing." That's inspiring someone, right? And then enrolling them, like helping them see that their highest value, whatever it is, work or the kids or friends or something, can be met even more deeply if they would do a couple key things that help the partnership. Like if you repair with me, for example, you'll have less stress. That will make you more focused at work. That will make you more money. Let's say we're with a partner who's a breadwinner, for example.
Mm-hmm.
We need to help them see how investing in the relationship work will help them get what they want.
Mm-hmm. Got it. Yeah, that makes sense. So hopefully you start taking you start putting initiative on yourself, and then you do the things, and that's enough to inspire the other person.
Yeah. And then once in a while, we have to lay down the hammer. Like if we're with a partner who just is a complacent person around repair, for example, again, I think that's the most important thing in a long-term partnership is the willingness and ability to repair. That's why I put so much focus on this part, this lever. We might need to lay down the hammer and say, look, I don't need you to be a different person. I need you to blah, blah, blah. I don't need you to change necessarily, but I do need a couple of things. And again, it's just like, I need you to take responsibility for your part. When you mess up, I need you to understand that I'm impacted by that. If you need an apology, then you say, look, apologies go a long way for me. Whatever it is that your nervous system needs to kind of let down and feel safe again and feel connected again, you can ask for those things. And ideally, we're in a partnership where our partner is open to feedback. And they're like, okay, thanks for the feedback. Shit, I need to step up. But if we're with a deadbeat, there's nothing worse than dragging a dead body up a mountain thinking you're going to get to the summit on your journey. Like it's terrible for feeling for both people.
Yeah. I think a big reason, and I can only speak from personal experience, but for me, I'm afraid of the initial. My experience over time has taught me that I'm afraid of the initial reaction
Mm-hmm.
of bringing up something like, "Hey, I don't like the way this is going," and I'm afraid of the initial reaction. But I'm always surprised at how different the uh, the response to it is a few hours after the initial reaction. So
Mm.
if I'm judging the effectiveness of me bringing up a prickly topic based on that initial response versus, okay, what does she do a few hours afterwards though? Then I find that I'm always surprised at how much my wife can handle, and
Mm-hmm.
how much yeah, and how it actually does. It is beneficial. I don't know if you can speak to
Yeah.
that, but I think guys are just really scared of, like, I don't want to rock the boat. I don't want
Yeah.
to.
Yeah. Exactly. So this gets into like a fear of conflict, right? Or making it worse. And I have a concept I call two shitty choices. So let me unpack that,
Yeah.
which might help guys. So, with the example you're sort of talking about, let's say I have an uncomfortable thing I want to say to my wife, and I'm scared. I have two choices. Choice A is I speak up and I speak the uncomfortable truth, whether it's feedback for her or an uncomfortable reveal about myself, about something I've been withholding. It doesn't matter. I'm just scared, right? So choice A is I'm gonna say something. Choice B is I don't want to say anything because I don't want to make it worse. So those are our two choices. So choice A, though, the fear is we're going to upset the other person so much that it's going to like really hurt the relationship, possibly to the point of losing the person. So that's the risk we take when we speak up is I might make it worse, rock the boat more, and she might or they might go away. That's choice A. Choice B is, okay, I'm not going to say anything, but meanwhile, I betray myself and my own truth and integrity by not saying anything. I keep the relationship with them, but I lose the relationship with myself.
Hmm.
Those are two shitty choices, right?
Yeah.
I lose the other person or lose myself. And so most people sit on their ass and wait and kind of automatically, by default, choose choice B. And if you're going to have a great relationship, a great marriage, choice A is required over and over and over again. And developing the skills and the courage to lean in to the discomfort
Hmm.
and just do it anyway. Because why would you want to be in a marriage or a long-term relationship where you have to like leave yourself behind to keep the relationship and like not be who you are. Like what a fucking miserable life.
Mm. Yeah, so like this is part of a broader theme that I've encountered in self-development, which is logically the answer is very clear, but emotionally it's hard to get the logic to just like what if there was like I mean just imagine what if there was something that could instantly take something logical and you could convince your emotional brain of whatever it is. Like how much easier would life be if
Oh my God.
you know? So
Yeah.
like it's logically easy to understand this concept of choosing between two shitty choices and choosing the one that has some potential. But getting to the point where you feel emotionally more comfortable doing it or more
Hmm.
comfortable actually putting it into action and putting it into practice, how do you do that?
Yeah, I mean that's a great question. I think we have to get more resilient, right? It kind of speaks to if we if we continue to be scared of this and it's very hard for us, it we have to have some self-compassion. Like clearly we grew up in a family or an environment where it wasn't okay to be ourselves. And so we had a lot of reps keeping it inside and not saying anything and just going along to get along. And there's a groove, there's a rut. The myelination in the brain went towards self-preservation and keep the relationship and let's not rock the boat here. So we have to disrupt that. And it does take um, practice, courage, and you've got to see that on the other side of every hard conversation is what you want, which is a more fulfilling relationship where you get to be yourself and your voice is included and your feelings matter. And it might not be with that person. It might turn out that the reason you've been withholding is because, yeah, they're going to get really upset and they do get really upset and the relationship's over.
Mm,
So what? There's another person down the road that's going to actually receive all of you. And I want that for you. I want that for everybody listening. Um, so it's like, yeah, mindset coupled with like reps doing the uncomfortable thing, like, and doing hard things in general, like doing cold plunges and doing yoga and doing saunas and doing whatever is hard every
mm,
day, so that we get more resilient. We're okay with hard things. Like I'm not afraid to be uncomfortable.
yeah, that's a great point. Um, so another question I was thinking of is, at what point do you decide to bring up? At what point do you decide that a topic is worth bringing up? Like, what are the things that you're just like, oh, she didn't put this away. I'm just gonna let it go. I'm gonna
Hmm.
practice some grace here and like not comment on, even though it bothered me. I'm just gonna not talk about it. Versus there are things that you're like, okay, this is really annoying me now and I need to bring it up. Like how do you because if you just brought up everything, like that would be exhausting. And I don't think that would be a
Totally.
recipe for a good relationship.
Yeah, this is an important point. Yeah, when someone is like, you're asking, do we fight over every little thing and bring up every little thing, every little complaint, or not? Because we just go in circles. And I think that's a really good point, that it's not necessary to bring up all the little things, because it's just when you partner with someone and you get past the honeymoon stage, you start to learn that, wow, I do actually have some complaints about this person. They do some things that bother me. Um, and then you have to decide which ones of those things are worth bringing up. Um, and for example, in my family, my wife is neat and very clean and organized, and I'm kind of messy and disorganized. And I've improved. She's asked me to improve, and I have improved, but I'm still not where she's at, and I never will be, because I don't care. But I care about her feelings. And so if I leave my shit all over the place, expecting sort of mom to pick up after me, because that's why I'm messy, is because when I was a kid, my mom did everything for me. And so I had to learn how to, like, in a marriage, it's like, whoa, I have to learn that my wife is not my mom picking up after me. And so I've stepped up my game, but it ain't perfect. But that doesn't ever really create a fight in our marriage.
Hmm.
We fight about way more important things than that. Um, like finances, or like, what are we doing with our life? Or how about how you treat me when we're under stress and how I treat you? Like, that's way more important. Am I empathizing with your feelings? Do you care about my experience? The listening to her and deeply understanding her and empathizing is way more important than if I'm neat or messy, um, and vice versa. So yeah, pick bigger things that really matter, and get very good at working through those things.
What would be the formula in terms of how would you express that to your partner in a way where it's received well? Because you could probably do it in a way that says like, "You never pick your shit up. You're so messy. Pick your shit up,"
Yeah,
which is the not good way to do it. So like, what is the is there a
yeah.
framework or a
Just I'll tell you what my wife did, and she never even, like, what was so cool about her is she rarely asks me to change. She'll just say how she's impacted. So
mm,
this is a really good, the formula is basically share how you're impacted by the other person's behavior.
okay.
And it's a simple, like, when you do blank, I feel blank. So when you leave your shit around the house, her second part of the sentence was, I feel stressed. It creates stress for me.
Mhm.
And I don't want to create stress for my wife. And she actually didn't say, can you get your shit together? Can you start picking up your shit? She just said, look, when you do this, it's okay. It's just, I feel more stress and I feel more responsible. And I don't like that feeling. And I was like, shit,
Mm.
I don't want to have that impact on her. So I started slowly changing my behavior,
Yeah.
right? Trying to step up my game.
Yeah.
Now it could be more direct though. You could say, hey, when you leave your stuff all over the house, and I feel stressed, and I would like you to work on that. It would be cool if you would be just a little neater in these areas. I'm not asking you to dust. I'm not asking you to like sweep and mop and do all those things, but I do, like, if there's pee on the toilet seat, please just like take care of that. That's really upsetting to me.
Yeah.
Just some basic, like, oh, right. Okay. Yes, I can do that for you.
I think it's so interesting that your wife obviously found this very natural, and I don't know if she ever had to ever be instructed in how this is. Well, for my experiences, I don't know how to do it. Like I don't know how to bring up,
Yeah.
like I have to learn how to do it. But for her, she
Yeah.
just does it perfectly, and I'm like, oh, that's how you do it.
It's funny. I feel like the one that's always learning. My wife's kind of a natural at this
Mm,
relational stuff, and I'm the one usually like trying to figure something out.
yeah. So like that makes me think that I grew up in a house where we just didn't complain about each other. We didn't really bring things up.
Hmm.
And it was most apparent for me when a couple of things. It was most apparent for me when I was being, criticized for something by my wife. So if she was telling me how to do something in particular, or if she was trying to help me with something, oh, don't try to help me with something. That's like just the worst for me. So like I just grew up in
Mm.
this atmosphere where to question someone's ability to do something or to act in a way that implied they were not capable of doing it yourself themselves was like, whoa, okay, this is like dangerous territory, and I
Yeah.
just learned never to do it. So, when my wife does complain to me, and even now, like it sets off a deeply ingrained fight, flight, freeze response that was I didn't
Hmm.
even have a choice in in
Yeah.
creating. It's just something that I inherited, um,
Yeah.
and so yeah, that's something that I really struggle with.
Can I give you a suggestion there?
I was going to ask, but yeah.
Cool. Yeah. So cool that you're aware of this and that it has its roots prior to meeting your wife, which usually for a lot of guys, by the way, have a criticism button.
Mm,
We're sensitive to not doing it right or being told we need help with something. It's like there's a trigger there for a lot of guys. For me, it was because I grew up with a critical father, right, who criticized my actions, and so I was like, "Ugh," really braced.
mm,
Now, when I feel like I'm not doing it right or something like that, I'm like, "Ugh." So you could just say, honey, I'm having that experience where I feel criticized and judged for how I'm doing things. And I can feel myself getting really defensive,
Mm,
and I'm not going to defend myself, but I can just feel that feeling coming on. I just want to fight.
mm,
So you're naming all the things that are true, which helps you feel seen and known in what's actually occurring, but then you don't defend yourself,
mhm,
right? You just don't do it. You just say you're about to. You say, "Oh, I really want to defend myself. I want to attack. I want to like fight back here. I want to say leave me alone or back off or whatever the actual, true feelings are for you." Um, and that will help her get to know, like, oh right, I hit that button, didn't I, Dean?
mhm.
That's such a button for you.
Yeah.
Um, and then she can be more sensitive, and then she can also be curious about you because she's not going to feel attacked by you defending yourself.
Mm. Yeah, because I think I've reacted to it enough to the point that she is extremely sensitive to it, and so
Hmm.
she holds back a lot because she's like, "I'm not allowed to complain to you because when I do, and I don't want that for her." Um, so I mean, I recognize that it's on me to have a better response to that.
Yeah.
Um, but it's really hard just to bite my tongue
Hmm.
and just because I just freeze. I recognize that in that situation,
Hmm.
I just freeze. I'm not like, um, I'm not responding. I
Hmm.
am holding back anger and I am holding back my fight response, but I'm freezing instead in that situation. And so like she's saying it and she's explaining her frustration, but I'm closed off to it.
Right.
And so it's like it's
Yeah.
just a really yeah, I wish I don't know what
Do you?
I think I'm just so afraid of that. Well, for me, I know what it's rooted in. It's a fear of abandonment. Like
Mm.
for me, it's like she's complaining about me. She doesn't like me. She's going to leave me. So like
She's going
that's what
away. Yeah.
happens. So
Got
like
it.
that's where my emotions go to when I'm
Uh-huh.
being confronted about something like, oh shit, I'm gonna like, she's gonna kick me out, or like I'm gonna, I'm gonna lose the
Yeah.
kids. Like
Yeah.
that's where my head goes to, even though, you
Do you
know,
tell her that in the moment? Are you so frozen you can't tell her that?
I think we've had the discussions before. Like I'm a huge proponent of couples counseling, and we still have a biweekly appointment. We did a weekly appointment for a long, probably maybe a year, and I think that was a topic that came up,
Hmm.
and so I think she knows about it. But I think for me, just saying like, hey, like I want to hear what you're saying. Also, right now, I'm just going through that experience that I feel like you're going to, you know, abandon me. And one time I remember I have this really we were arguing about, I'm sure it was child related, right? It was probably baby related of some sort. And I remember like her being really upset with me and her going off in one direction. And and it reminds me of the part of your book where you talk about one partner wants space in the situation and one
Yeah.
person wants to reconcile and connect. And so my
Yeah.
wife is the one who's like, just give me 12 hours and I'll be fine.
Yeah.
Like she'll be mad at me, won't talk to me, and we'll go to sleep. And then like at 2 p.m. the next day, she's like, "How are you?" I'm like, "What the hell?
Right.
What just happened?"
Yeah.
And for me, I'm the one who wants to reconcile. And
Hmm.
we had this moment, this instance. I can't remember when it was, but we had this argument. She went off on her own, and I said, "Hey, like, I just want you to tell me, like, you're not going to leave me, right?" Which sounded so ridiculous to her. She was like, "What?" I'm like, "That's
Right.
where I go. That is where my head
Yeah.
goes, like, when you do this to me and then, like, go sit on the other end of the couch. I feel incredibly insecure. I feel like you're going to abandon me."
Yeah.
And she was like, "No, I'm not gonna leave you.
Yeah.
We're just disagreeing." And for
Right.
her, it was so, like, it was just
Yeah.
so matter of fact that she's like, "How could you
Hmm.
think that?" But for me, like, this is my experience whenever an argument happens, I'm like, "Oh, shit, I'm losing this person," you know?
Yeah, this is so. I really appreciate you saying that. I'm like more like you. I'm more of the kind of anxious partner. My wife's more of the withdrawer. Um, so back to your example, and this is, by the way, I call this like the fight below the fight. You
Mm,
could, whatever the fight was about, it's sort of like there's an issue. Let's say it was about money or the kids, and then there's what happens when she withdraws and you want to talk about it, right?
mhm,
And that's like another layer that a lot of people aren't aware of in working through conflict and getting back to a good place. And it's essentially an attachment dynamic, right? Um, it's like how your nervous system is wired in relationship under stress. You want to go toward and work it out, and she wants to go away
mm,
because she probably grew up in a family where relationships weren't that reliable, and she was kind of on her own, and that felt better. So she doesn't see, withdrawing types don't see that relationships could be resourcing, and actually it's faster to work through the thing, to talk or to be connected. Anyway, yeah, if the I liked what you did in couples counseling, where it's like being able to say that, hey, I really want to respond to you, but I'm having that abandonment fear come up, or I feel very scared or anxious or whatever. My activation is high right now about that. And then she can hopefully have compassion for that, and you don't need to necessarily do anything other than say it. But here's the thing: if you don't keep working with that in the moment, she's going to feel dropped about whatever her complaint was,
mm,
right? So she feels like, oh, I bring up something hard, and Dean goes into his fear thing, and now I feel even more alone.
mm,
So both partners, she has a responsibility to keep you in mind when she's wanting to withdraw. You have a responsibility to keep her in mind when you're wanting to talk
mm,
or hurry up and talk it out and get back to a good place. Like you both have to. Then this is one of the hardest things to do, honestly, under stress in a partnership, is keep each other in mind when your own triggers come up.
mhm. Yeah,
But that's
yeah,
the practice.
yeah, it's much harder to talk about something when you're not activated, as opposed to waiting until it activates and then trying to have, like, a working through that situation.
Hmm.
It doesn't work out well, but you don't wanna bring it up when things are going well because 'cause you're like, "Hey, things are going well right now, like, I don't wanna bring up this topic that's going to
Yeah,
lead to." So
lead to more disconnection or whatever. Yeah.
yeah, so I really like, the idea in your book of, the book is called Getting to Zero, and 0 being the level of tranquility, relationship tranquility, where I'm sure you have a better description for it than that, but
Just getting back to a good place.
yeah. So getting back to a good place. So I love that you explain, conflict as I love that you point out that conflicts drain you.
Yeah.
So, like, understanding that conflicts that are unresolved, that you just you that you feel like you feel some sort of inclination to do something about them, but you ignore them and focus on something else instead. And then understanding that those conflicts are draining you
Hmm.
from, I mean, physically, mentally, emotionally, spiritually. I think understanding conflicts in that light makes you much more motivated to I gotta get this thing figured out. I gotta actually do something about this because every minute that goes on that I don't do something about it's just draining me and making me more um, less effective at everything
Yeah.
else in life.
Yeah, and you have a slow cortisol drip going on, and that low grade stress of not getting to zero, not getting back to a good place, actually is taking years off your life. The Gottmans, who are some of the leading researchers in relationship education, their research is amazing. When I interviewed them, they said that couples that know how to work through conflict live 10 years longer than couples who don't. That's
Wow.
kind of mind blowing. And if you're living in a constant state of recurring stress because you don't know how to get to zero as a couple, that's taking years off your life. It's really the downstream effects are significant if we don't figure this out. Just like if you're at a job you hate for 10 or 20 years, that's taking years off your life. If you're in a toxic relationship, that's taking years off your life. So I hope we're motivating somebody here listening to learn the art and skill of working through conflict so that you can get back to that place of ease and flow and connection. That's where we all want to live. But you've got to earn that. It's not given to you. We didn't learn this in school. Your parents probably didn't teach you. They had shitty role modeling, whatever. It's like, well, fine.
Mm-hmm.
You learn then. You've got to apply yourself together and learn. And then you get the rewards.
Mm. Yeah. I mean, that's motivation for me. So you've helped definitely at least one person is
Cool.
reminded. So I don't ask a ton of male specific questions on this podcast. Oddly enough, I ask about male specific in terms of things that males commonly struggle with. But a question that I'm thinking of is to 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 what extent are to what extent should men feel responsibility as a man to take charge of this the responsibility of improving the relationship, or recognizing, um, in your book you talk about being the relationship author,
Mm-hmm.
as opposed to the victim. I guess to what extent, or is there something specific to being a man that men should take the initiative in this?
I don't think so. I don't think it matters what gender you are. Ideally, both people become relational leaders so that they can have a kick-ass, extraordinary partnership for life. That's ideal.
Mm-hmm.
But if one of you is not, and you're both sitting around, like, someone needs to lead the relationship to a new place. And if it's the man, great. If it's the woman, great. I don't care.
Mm-hmm.
Um, I think there are certain levers for some men, especially if men are like Christian men, for example, are like, it's man's job to lead the family, right?
Mm-hmm.
That was
Yeah,
kind of my dad's
and
generation.
that's where the theme has showed up for, in what I've read, that's where the theme shows up a lot more, of the man leading the relationship.
Yeah, and
Whereas
so if
in a
that,
lot of the non-Christian circles, it's like, whoever, fine.
yeah, yeah. So I think whatever your religious views are, or spiritual views, it again doesn't matter. Just somebody take the lead, and if a man wants to feel some pride in being that person, great. But again, it's hard to lead a relationship without a co-pilot, with a person who's not wanting to be a co-leader, sharing power. I prefer the model of we share power, my wife and I,
Mm-hmm.
versus I'm leading the family and I have more power than her because I make the money or something like that, or she
Mm-hmm.
has more power than me. No, a good, secure, badass partnership is one where two people share power equally. There's a lot of equity, feels
Mm-hmm.
fair, feels good to both people.
Yeah. So that actually brings up, and I totally agree with that. At least as it applies to my relationship, and that's also what my wife believes. She looks. We have some friends who have a, um, I don't know what you call it, husband led or male led
Mm-hmm.
marriage, and because they have a, what we just said, strong Christian upbringing, and so that's what they are used to, or those are the values that they've embraced. Um, but for her, she wants an equal place at the table. And so one thing that we kind of struggle with, when I was first starting the business, I didn't make as much money as her.
Mm-hmm.
She's a doctor, physical therapy doctor,
Mm-hmm.
um, or doctorate of physical therapy. She has a lot of certifications. She's been to a lot of school, and so she made more money than me for a long time. And then at some point, I started making more money, and then she stopped working to take care of our babies, and she's gone back and forth between, I have a 3.5-year-old and I have a 1-year-old, and so she's gone back and forth between work during that time. But a lot of our struggles now, or under a consistent theme in considering the struggles that we go through, is the financial or lack of
Yeah.
financial balance. She
Hmm.
feels, she feels very conscious and like and unequal in terms of in the financial contribution to our relationship, and so that causes her to have reservations about demanding what she wants, or like getting
Hmm.
her opinions heard. Or so I'm wondering, in that situation,
Hmm.
how do you help couples with that?
Yeah, I always say it's not about money or sex or whatever you're fighting about. It's all about how you fight,
Mm,
how you work through the differences. So there's no formula, and I would challenge any formula someone has on how to get through this. It's, are we going to collaborate to solve this together where both people feel understood, cared for, respected, and acknowledged for how they're holding the finances. So and then from that place, the two of you can solve any problem together because you're a team.
hmm
But if you're in opposition, one person's feeling undervalued, another person's feeling more valued, or there's sort of criticism, or there's some kind of resentment occurring, it's it's gonna be very hard to solve problems from that place. So it's all in how you talk about it, how you work through it, how you listen, how you um, really get her world around what it's like to be her as a part-time working mother. Uh, what is that like, and what's the impact? And given that I'm earning more, and you want to do X, Y, and Z, yeah, what is this like for you? And what is it like for me that I'm in this position? And if when two people really commit to understanding, anything's possible.
hmm Yeah, that's one component of the first few pages that I read. Is I think I even underlined it because I was like, whoa, this is a really powerful statement. But that's just, it talks about the difference between a someone who is the victim in the relationship and someone who is the author in the relationship. And I'm flipping through the pages now, but the victim, I'm paraphrasing because I can't find it yet, but the victim is
Hmm.
somebody who says it's not, the victim is someone who says, I mean, essentially, it was so well phrased that I'm not even going to paraphrase it. Paraphrase it. I'm just gonna I'm just gonna find where I underlined it and then say it. Aha! During conflict, the victim in us says, "Take my side. I'm right," whereas the author in us says, "Help me see my side. I'm open to being wrong."
Yeah, bingo.
Yeah, yeah. Like for me, that was a statement that I was like, oh, okay, like that. That's the thing. So instead of trying to get person to understand your point of view, you're trying to get a more complete picture and trying to understand what's what's your perception of all of this, because I'm not getting it, because I'm not able to,
Hmm.
like, I'm not understanding it.
Yeah, when my wife, for years I would defend myself when she'd say, "I don't feel understood. I don't feel like you're understanding me," and I'd say, "Yes, I am," which was such a waste of time. And I changed the rules to, "I don't understand you, honey, until you say you feel understood."
Mm-hmm.
And that's chapter 11 of my book, LUFU, listen until the other person feels understood. It's a skill to listen in such a way that your partner is like, "Ah, thanks. Yeah, I feel like you're getting it. I feel like you're getting me."
Mm-hmm.
And of course, you want them to do that for you.
Yes.
Should be fair, right? Should be equal.
Yeah. I
Yeah, it
remember
goes a long way.
our couples therapist had us go through that, and it was probably one of the more uncomfortable things that I've done in the moment, because you're setting aside your own ego, you're setting aside your own perspective, and because it's difficult, because you can't. It's you know the object in that situation is to be incredibly objective and to set your feelings aside, your perspective aside, and say, okay, I'm going to understand your perspective as completely as I can, and then be
Yeah.
able to say it back to you. And when you do it, you're like, okay, as you're doing it, it's like, oh, this is so uncomfortable. Like, okay, I'm just going to forget about all of my, all of my feelings of
Yeah.
this. Oh, you mean you don't want me to think about my, like what I'm going through? And, um, but like
Yeah.
at
There's
the
a real
end of it,
scarcity in that, right?
yeah, geez, yeah. But like at the end of that, you know, at the end of it, you're like, okay. And then obviously, yes, you have to do it for both of you, because if you didn't
Yeah.
and you just one sided, that would just be the biggest blue balls
Oh,
of
be
all
terrible.
time. Oh my god,
Yeah. Yeah.
I'd be like, I need a day. Bye.
Right.
um, so yeah, it is. It's a super powerful, and so simple, right? Just like let me understand your perspective.
Yeah. And I don't understand it until you tell me I understand it.
Mm, yeah, yeah. That's a good metric. Like, how do you know if you did it well?
Yeah.
Well, I feel like you understand me now. You did
Yeah. Yep.
it. Awesome. Um, so I have one more question that I wrote down, and it has to do with actually one thing that I really like is your question. You question the effectiveness of venting,
Hmm.
right? And because I've seen this in I think I had a solid 6 months in my therapy where it was just me showing up and like venting about Marissa in like some form or another. Not the entire
Yeah.
time, but like a lot of it was devoted to me just like venting. Right. And so as a result, my wife like resented my therapist because like you just show up and complain about
For
me the whole
sure.
time. And I'm like, well, I mean, I just talk about what I'm feeling and my marriage is important to me. So I got to talk about that. But in your book, you say like it's actually not a good thing for you to go vent to your friend and then have them tell you, "Yeah, you're right, fuck her," because that doesn't. I mean, like, oh well, yeah, duh. So I'm wondering if you can speak to that a little bit more.
Yeah. Yeah. And this is where the male, like men's work and men's groups are pretty key. I always say to my male friends, and my wife knows this. My wife knows that every guy in my men's group has her back.
Mm,
So if I'm going to bitch about her, they're listening, but they're like, mm, "I got her back. Also, I got your back, Jason, but I got her back." So, and I want what's best for both of you because they
mm,
love her, right? And so they're like, "I'm not going to let you sit here and run your mouth about your wife and how she's wrong about something. I'm going to challenge you to help see your side,
mm-hmm,
to how you're actually part of the problem here."
mm-hmm,
Like when I coach people, I let people vent for like 5 minutes because it's off gassing. It's like, you just get it out, get your bitching and complaining out. And now let's get to work,
mm-hmm,
which is what is your part of this problem? And I'm going to challenge and support the person to help them see what they're not seeing about themselves so that they can go back and take ownership with their partner rather than, yeah, that's fucked up. Like you were saying, like
yeah,
that's just doesn't go anywhere.
yeah, and it makes it feel like you're. To me, it's also like you're just creating a. It's almost like lying by omission, right? You're just creating another layer, another wall between the two of you, because
Yeah.
instead of expressing it to her, to him, you're, you're just like burying it someone else. You're just burying it somewhere else, and you're like, I'm putting it in this box over here, and it definitely won't, even though it's underwater, it definitely won't rise to the surface.
Right.
You know.
Yeah, the concept in the book is, and this is not my concept. I didn't invent this, but it comes from systems theory, which is just triangles that you triangulate. I go to a friend, complain about my boss. Me and my friend are in cahoots about, I'm the victim, my friend's the rescuer, my boss is the villain. That's a triangle, and those are very stable. They don't go anywhere until someone challenges the whole system and says, actually, I want to get empowered here.
Mm,
I want to see my side. I want to take responsibility for how I co-created this dynamic, and I want to get out of it. I don't want to blame anyone because blame feels bad. Um, and I don't need to be rescued because I'm not a baby. I'm like an adult here,
hmm
and I can I want to be supported and challenged to face my problems.
Hmm. That was another part of the victim section where I was like, oh, that hits. Where you said any form of blaming is, I don't know if it was any form of blaming, but the overall idea was blaming is a form of victimization,
Yeah,
right?
100%. It's one of the roadblocks to reconnection. It's just feel free to blame away, but you're not going to get anywhere in life.
Hmm.
You know?
Yeah. Because instead of accepting the responsibility, you're putting that responsibility on someone else. You're
Yeah,
effectively saying, I'm not responsible for this. It is this person's fault. And therefore I don't have any agency in the situation and can't do anything
yeah,
about it.
that's right. Win lose.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Um, the last question that I had was um, personal question again, but for sometimes when I'm getting maybe selfish or frustrated with a situation, I will um, or I'm like just not willing to give more grace to the situation. I'm not willing to let things go and like and like and put my ego on the shelf. It's when I feel like I'm the one who's making more concessions or like who's
Mm-hmm.
what advice would you give? Because I think someone who is in like the position that I'm in where they're really into self-development and they're making I can't say making more of an effort because I think that's incorrect, but I think if they're making the effort in a way that you're thinking in terms of reading books and trying to apply things that you're reading in books or courses or podcasts, and you feel like you're the one who's making that effort, and then putting your ego on the shelf more than the other person,
Mm-hmm.
that leads to some resentment and
Yeah.
contempt. And I don't. What's the best way to deal with that feeling?
Yeah. If I'm your partner, I just want you to bring that up with me. Hey, this is starting to feel a little out of balance. I don't, but I would say, I would always preface, I use very spacious language when I'm fighting or arguing or trying to get to resolution with someone. And it's language like, I have a flawed memory here, but this is kind of how I see it. My memory's not perfect. I'm not saying I'm right. I lead with things like that, or like almost little mini disclaimers.
Hmm.
Because a lot of people get very fixed, right? I'm right, you're wrong. No, I know exactly what happened yesterday when we were fighting. No, that's not what I said. I know exactly what I said. Like that's a
Mm.
complete waste of time. You got to say, look, I don't know what I said, but my flawed memory thought it was this, but I'm totally open to being wrong. That tells me I'm a willing opponent slash participant slash collaborator.
Hmm.
So you could just say, hey, I'm starting to feel like I'm making more concessions when we're in a conflict than you are. I don't know if that's true, but that's just what it feels like over here. Can we talk about that?
Mm.
I
Eh,
feel like I'm putting more effort in. I don't know if that's true because you probably think you're putting a ton of effort in. It's just something's feeling off and unfair to me. I don't know what it is. Can we talk about that?
mm.
Can we look at that together? Can we stand side by side and look at that issue over here together?
Hmm. Yeah, so that response, and then also I think some of the other stuff that we've gone through is coming to the conversation or coming to the uh, uh, the discussion on the conflict and showing that you are willing to admit your wrongs in the situation and that you are open to revising
Yeah.
the story of that
Hmm.
of what happened instead of
Yeah.
coming in and saying you're wrong and I need an apology, but coming in and presenting it in a way that you're like, I want to accept responsibility for this. I'm willing to admit, what I did wrong in the situation, and then being able to present and make that part
Yeah.
of the.
Yeah. Yeah. If you're saying leading with that, I'm pretty receptive.
Hmm, that's an awesome. That's an awesome response. So, one other thing I wanted to ask about, and this is the last thing I'll ask about before I get into the part two, is when I spoke with you last week, you talked about the relationship school. And, for me, I was like, I'm actually really interested in this myself, and I thought it
Mhm.
might be, I don't know, I thought it might be like a 30-day guided course, and it's actually 9 months. And I was like, wow, that's a long time. And then I thought about, well, I mean, if my relationship is the most important part of my life when it comes to my overall health, then maybe 9 months is worth it. So, yeah, I just wanted to ask about, selfishly, I kind of wanted to ask about that. Um, and, uh, and yeah, just if you could talk a little bit about the relationship school.
Yeah. Yeah. So the relationship school we have, it's just we're an education organization trying to empower people to get this part of their lives dialed. We primarily focus on the intimate partnership because that's the hardest for most people. Once you figure that out, you can do just about any relationship well. Um, and I made it a 9-month course because partly in conjunction with the school schedule, fall semester, spring semester kind of vibes.
Oh,
Um, but I also was tired as a therapist many years ago, having people come in and out of couples work or individual work, kind of just not making progress that I knew was possible. So I started leading men's groups, mixed gender groups, couples groups. I started experimenting with longer and longer commitments. So I did a men's commitment that was 6 months. I did a couple of men's leadership trainings that were that long,
hmm,
and I saw massive transformation. And I wanted to push that. I didn't want to go to a year, but I wanted to push it. So I did 9 months based on the school calendar. And what I saw was just extraordinary in terms of when someone starts and when someone finishes. And like you said, if I'm going to go to the gym, am I going to, and I make a 30-day commitment versus a 9-month commitment, there's two people, let's say, who's going to be more fit, the 9-month person or the 30-day person? It's pretty obvious
yeah.
because there's lasting transformation. It's not like a, cool, I did it for 30 days and now I can go back to my life. It's, no, I got it in set for 9 months and now I don't want to go back to my life. This is how I want to live my life.
Mm, yeah.
And so the course is called Relationship Mastery, and it's really about mastering, knowing that it's a kind of a lifelong commitment, right? Is I'm going to work on mastering this for the rest of my life because that's what mastery is. But it's the stepping stone. It's going to get you started on that path.
Hmm. How much time does it take per week?
Anywhere from 3 hours to 6 hours, depending on how serious you are.
Hmm.
Because there's practice calls. There's a lot of it's recorded, not live. So do it your own pace. And then
Mm,
there's live components like group coaching. There's office hours. There's different things where you can get more interaction.
mm,
But the people that practice and do practice with people they don't even know are the people that get results
yeah.
the fastest and the biggest.
Gotcha.
Yeah.
Sweet. All right. Time to move on to part two. So these are the questions that I like to ask all of our guests, and this is you'll see what they are in a second. So, what do you think is one habit, belief, or mindset that has helped you the most in terms of your overall happiness?
Ooh. Any kind of self reflection, self awareness practice, which I'll put meditation and journaling in that.
Mm, yeah, I am incredibly. I've said this multiple times, but um, if you can see it on video or you can hear it in the audio, Jason is probably one of the most relaxed people that I've ever met. One of the most relaxed men that I've ever met. It's an extremely reassuring presence to be in, even digitally. And yeah, just based on my knowledge of well-being and stress management, I would have to say that your meditation habit and your immersion, not immersion, but your involvement in Buddhism has got to be like a big component of that.
Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah. What is one thing that you do for your health that you think is overlooked or undervalued by others?
It's what we've been talking about this whole time, relational health. Um, People overlook this everywhere. And I think not just our relationship with ourselves, but primarily how we're connecting and how deeply we're connecting with others, how much we feel seen and known by others, and how much they feel seen and known by us is major in terms of well-being.
Hmm. What's the most important activity you regularly do for your stress management?
Exercise.
Okay. What is the most stressful part of your day-to-day life?
Mm, yeah, when I'm in my left brain trying to solve business problems.
Mm, yeah, that reminds me of the concept of like trying to parent when you're in work mode. You're just like,
Right.
it doesn't work.
Yeah.
Uh, what do you think is the biggest challenge facing men and their well-being right now?
The straitjacket of their own conditioning from early childhood till right now. How they're told to be as a man, how they should be as a man, what you need to be as a man.
Mm,
All that bullshit propaganda is just holding so many guys back from being who they are.
I know we don't ask us, but it's the best way to start addressing that.
Look in the mirror and say, raise your hand and say, I've got problems and I'm willing to work on them.
Love that. All right. Well, Jason, thanks for joining me on the Better Man podcast. I'd love it if you could talk more about relationship school and your socials and other stuff that people can follow you on.
Yeah, thanks, Dean. So I have a lot of demo videos. I've been doing more like how-to videos on YouTube. And that's at Jayson Gaddis, Jason with a Y. You can check those out. And relationshipschool.com is where our podcast lives, blog, all our courses, trainings, certification programs.
Mm-hmm.
And my book that Dean mentioned is everywhere books are sold, Getting to Zero, How to Work Through Conflict in Your High Stakes Relationships.
Cool. All right. Well, I really enjoyed this conversation. Again, it's just really nice talking with you in general. So thank you for that. Hopefully we can get you on again. We can have more conversations. But yeah, thank you for your time. Thank you for sharing your in-depth knowledge and expertise.
You got it. Thanks, Dean. It's been a treat, man. Been good hanging out.
Yeah. All right, guys. I hope this inspires you to be a better man. I'll see you on the next episode.
If you like that episode, check out this other one right here. I think you're really going to enjoy it. If you haven't subscribed, click this subscribe button over here, and you can listen to the full episodes on any major podcasting platform. Full details below in the description.